Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise. Here we watch episodes from Star Trek, the original series, and dissect it for story structure, story arcs, the things we like and things we don't like. And at the end, we ask a hypothetical question to the screenwriter. I am Bala Ramudurai, and with me I have my co host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello,
Hello,
Parvati.
everyone, and welcome to Podcast Enterprise, where we talk about Star Trek.
Okay, today we have an interesting
Yeah.
episode satire on TV. It's called Bread and Circuses. Parvati, can you summarize this episode for us,
Yes,
please?
when this episode opens, the USS Enterprise is in orbit around a planet 8924. They're looking for an individual called R.M. Merik. He's an old friend of Captain Kirk, and he was in command of a spaceship that went missing on this planet, and they want to find him before he violates a Prime Directive. And of course, Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy beam down onto this planet. They want to investigate and find Merik, but they don't want to violate the Prime Directive and interfere with this planet's civilization, because from their scans they have found that there are cities, there is a civilization, there is a 20th century civilization. According to Federation law, they want to leave it as is. However, they land in this valley type area. They are promptly captured by a couple of people wearing pale and grubby clothes. They are threatened with violence and dragged off to the mountains. In the mountains, there are caves where an old man comes out. He trusts Captain Kirk for some reason. The person who captured Kirk, McCoy, and Spock is called Flavius Maximus, which is a very Roman name. It seems that these people in the caves are escaped slaves who follow the sun. And we don't know what the sun is. They call themselves the children of the sun. They are also very focused on peace and brotherhood and that camaraderie and that sort of thing. So they shun all kinds of violence, apparently. Even though Flavius Maximus wants to shoot Kirk, he doesn't. And it also comes to light that the place that they escaped from is Rome, an alien Rome that keeps slaves. The slaves escaped from there. Rome is still thriving. It has come into the 20th century. They have television, they have cars, they have electricity, and they have a television network that actually broadcasts all of their gladiatorial fights. Flavius was one of the gladiators over there, and he escaped. So now he was one of the best gladiators, but he has escaped, and now he will not fight. Kirk still has to find Merik. And when he mentions his name to the old man in the cave, he realizes that Merik is now Mericus, a high ranking official in the city. Kirk has to go to the city, find Mericus, and as things go, he finds himself captured, imprisoned. He meets Mericus, who is now in a strange mental state because he has had to watch his crew get killed in the gladiatorial fights. There's also proconsul Claudius Marcus, who is almost in charge of the entire empire. He is a very shrewd, irritating character who wants to throw Kirk and the rest of them into a gladiatorial fight for TV ratings. And also, they managed to bring Flavius back into the arena. And the arena is actually a bit of a joke because it's a small area in a studio where they have to stand within a rectangular space and fight each other to the death. And this is where McCoy and Spock have a lot of quips also. Spock is able to use his nerve pinch against his opponents. They escape from this area. Kirk has to use his wits to outwit his way out of this hellish Roman Empire. The experience of watching this is pretty surreal. And also, he manages to convey somehow to Spock about the Enterprise that there is something wrong, and Spock has to use a bit of ingenuity to get the rest of them out of there. Merik, when push comes to shove, and when it comes to the end of this episode, he uses that last opportunity to get Kirk and the rest of them back onto the Enterprise while being killed himself. And this is where Kirk, when he's back in the Enterprise, he's wondering what the children of the sun actually mean. And Spock thinks that sun worship is a very primitive religion, but then it turns out that it's not the sun sun, it is the son sun. They are followers of some variation of Christianity. And so Kirk feels that this Roman Empire will also fall. Back to you, Bala.
The 4-act structure, in which we have, starting with the teaser as always. The 4-act structure starts with the teaser, and here we have the basis of why they are there. It gives you a concept of the entire episode itself, what's going to happen. So Captain Merik is missing. The ship is destroyed. SS Beagle is destroyed, and all they can see is a TV show telecast from the planet. One of the crew, William Harrison, is found in the screen clip. This is what gears them into action, and that's what the teaser is all about. So we have a TV show, we have Merik missing, we have a spaceship destroyed, and one of the crew was part of the TV show itself. So this is the teaser. In Act 1, you can see that the landing party, consisting of Spock, McCoy, and Kirk, beam to the surface, only to find a Rome-like city. There are people who are runaways, rebels, or apparently slaves, but they believe in a different philosophy. They dress differently, they speak differently, they believe in something completely different. So that's what is this setup of the first act. Throughout this first act, we are shown various aspects of the rebels, and the first act ends with Kirk wanting to meet Merik, the first citizen of this new Rome, parallel Rome, only to be caught by the police and branded as barbarians. And Flavius Maximus, who is also part of their search party. The second act starts with us seeing some visuals of this new Rome, all Roman buildings and Roman architecture, and the city with the automobiles, sort of like a 20th century Rome. Kirk, using his trickery or whatever you call it, conveys a message to Mericus to tell them that Starfleet is here and he's in trouble. That's how the second act starts, with Kirk and gang in a cage in a prison, and the institution slavery institutions, that's what Spock calls it, basically has them, and now they're exposed to the fact that there's TV, and Americus comes, and the proconsul Claudius Marcus also makes an appearance. You can see what a smart guy this guy is in very evil ways. Finally, he forces Kirk to message the starship so that they can beam all of them on board, on the planet. They can be beamed to the planet. However, Kirk doesn't do that. He gives Scotty a message saying it's all fine, but he also says the phrase condition green, which we as viewers do not know what it really means. We think everything is all go. Only the third act, that ends the second act, but in third act, from Scotty's mouth, we know that green means trouble. You should not interfere because of the Prime Directive. Scotty is planning to do something. We yet do not know what it is. Meanwhile, there's an alternating action between what's happening at the ship and down there on the planet. Uh, Third act is a short one where we see the arena, as Parvati described, the small sort of arena meant for the TV show. That's what is shown, with fake laughter, fake booing, fake applause, fake everything. The fight just gets over quickly without much fanfare. However, the end is not satisfying for the proconsul nor for Mericus. The entire gang is taken back to the cage, back to the quarters. That's how the third act really goes. That's how it ends. Fourth act starts with this blonde woman wine for Drusilla. Apparently, Kirk calls it torture. Spock and McCoy are in the cage, separated from Kirk. and Spock is trying to break. That's how the fourth act starts. So they try their best to get out of all of this. Kirk is taken for execution. Looks like Spock and McCoy are going to follow suit also. However, Scott does his act of scaring the people on the planet by just turning off the electricity momentarily, which gives Kirk a chance to escape. They do try to escape using a small machine gun. He tries to do that, but he can't. At the end, Scotty manages, with some help from Mericus, to beam the three of them aboard in one piece and leave the planet. With, of course, the last piece being Uhura explaining the whole sun thing, and with the veiled prediction that the quote unquote Roman Empire will definitely fall. So that's the end of the fourth act. Not a quip to end it, but the thinking moment in this case. So that's how it ends. So, what did you think about bread and circuses?
I'm a little conflicted about this. I can't say I enjoyed it per se, and I didn't hate it, which is yay for it, I think.
Hmm.
But I felt like it was all over the place because you have this quasi Roman Empire and it is stereotyped. I feel like the entire the so-called empire, or what little we see of it, is just so stereotyped. They are almost textbook evil, comically evil, and you have this proconsul
Hmm.
who is sneering, plotting, and not very bright when it comes down to it. Their culture seems to be mostly capturing people and throwing them into this little playmat of an arena so that they can stab each other to death. It's just for TV
Hmm.
ratings. I don't see how unrefined that they taste seem pretty unrefined to me. And probably the saving grace of this episode was the many light-hearted moments between McCoy and Spock. They had a lot to say to each other, and it was really funny. And I love those moments. Given how strangely this episode played out, I just sat through it for those quips. And it is an interesting thing. I'm also thoroughly not convinced by the declaration that this planet speaks English, and I feel like that was just done so that they can mix up the SON sun with the SUN sun. What did you think?
So I thought this is a good premise to have. I can see the satire on the TV part of
Yep.
it, that everything is done for ratings, whether it's people are losing their lives, people are making a mockery of the people
Mm.
there. All for what? All for some kind of rating. So people entertained. That's more important than what's really out there, kind of
Mm.
a
Yeah.
message. I think that's the comment. But they're trying to draw parallels. We had the Nazi in Patterns
Yep.
of Force, but it had a sound logic
Correct.
there,
Correct.
which is what was missing. Even the Chicago one, right? The gangsters
Mm,
saw
yes.
the book telling them what to
Yeah.
do and how to mimic. It was known that there's a mimicking
Correct.
culture, so it made
Yeah.
sense. For Patterns of Force, it was that historian who wanted the enterprising nature of the planet people to come to fore, make them more
Ha.
efficient. So he introduced the idea of this dictatorial rule,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
failed. But
Correct.
here, I thought Mericus had introduced this whole Roman idea to this. No, it turns out he was just a stooge in the whole
Yeah.
thing. There's a pawn in the whole thing.
Exactly.
It had been there forever, like 2000, 3000 years ago. They had already had
Yeah,
that.
that's the thing. I don't know what his role was exactly, other than allowing his crew to die. He's not
Hmm.
a very effective character that way. He does redeem himself towards the end, but the whole thing was just so unconvincing with having
Hmm.
this English speaking Roman Empire that lasted.
Right.
I don't know, it felt horribly self righteous towards the end when they said it's going to fall anyway because of this new
Hmm.
philosophy that is spreading. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, it had some moments. The TV ratings could have been done a little better. When they first showed the arena, I wanted to laugh. It was so small. It's just a little mat in a small studio, and they have to stay within the confines of that mat and stab each other, which would have been a comical. The one thing I did like was them urging these gladiators on to increase the TV ratings to keep fighting, and they are not allowed to stop. And the other thing I liked was, of course, the canned laughter, the canned booing,
Hmm.
and the clapping. Uh, Yeah,
Yeah.
those were actually recorded sound effects. There was nobody actually in the studio. A nice
Hmm.
way of mind control. And Kirk, it's a little funny, he was obsessed with that car called the Jupiter 9.
Jupiter
Jupiter
8.
8. He's obsessed with that for some reason. I feel like, yeah, it's a missed opportunity for me. First of all, it took a while to get used to the plot, and by the time you get some sense of what's going on, it's over and they're back at Enterprise.
Yeah. So Consul, he smacks his lip when he sees that there are 400 more barbarians who can
Yeah,
be used for the show.
correct.
He loves that idea. I think for me he was the one bright spot in this
Yeah,
episode, because the rest of it was a big stretch for me.
yeah,
There's hardly very tiny strand of logic connecting. It was like that Omega Glory thing, right? So
yeah,
you see a planet mimicking the flag, mimicking the Constitution and Pledge of Allegiance, and all of that. How can word for word be parallel?
correct.
So that can't
It
be.
didn't make
The
sense.
odds are very slim for
Yeah,
that. I get it. One or two things, maybe under one emperor, having smaller emperors who get together and some kind of conquest part of it, those war tactics, those can be
yeah,
parallel. But to have everything parallel, including the
yeah,
language, nuances of sun to sun,
correct.
it is just too much for me to
Yeah,
take.
it is a
There's
little.
no logical explanation to the whole
It
thing.
is thoroughly illogical, I think. Spock was
Mm.
fixated on. I love this one dialogue where McCoy once, I'd like to be able to land someplace and say, "Behold, I am the Archangel Gabriel." Why not? He never gets that opportunity.
Gone there
I,
and said, I am Archangel
I
Gabriel.
mean, he should have gone in there as the Archangel Gabriel, and you could have had Spock with a pitchfork. It would have been fun.
There's a few subtle things that I noticed, like the two moons and
Yes,
the
yes,
remastered version.
yes.
So they had a couple of moons there. This is the guy Athos who comes in all our yesterdays in a much later season 3
Hmm.
episode. This is the librarian who comes there. The children of sun, he says, right?
Yeah.
Timus is the same actor that plays Athos later on.
Yeah. uh, Self-righteous the direction it went in, and you have all of these stereotypes and playing up that uh, the empire has survived for so long exactly as it was, except now they have cars. It wasn't very convincing, and like you said, it made no sense for a parallel civilization to exist with so many cultural and linguistic similarities, including the language. At the very least, having two moons would have caused some kind of difference, but it doesn't. And
No, it
makes no
doesn't.
difference. The moons are just cosmetic. The sun is cosmetic. Everything is cosmetic. Maybe if they had focused more on the TV ratings and what they do to manipulate TV ratings and how they make their performers act in certain ways to get the ratings up, that might have been more convincing. But we had none of that. And I'm not sure what exactly the deal was with Captain Merik. On the one hand, he acts like he's sneering at Kirk, and then you have him pretending, or maybe he does feel the loss of his crew, and he's also pretty inept. He is not an effective captain
Hmm.
at all. He allowed all of his crew to come down and get decimated, or most of them at least in the arena. And then you start thinking, what exactly was he doing? Because if he has allowed his people to enter the arena, he has already violated the Prime Directive. He might as well have just attacked or something. I don't know. To me, it made very little sense.
Hmm.
Like you said, the proconsul was an interesting character. I think the actor also did a brilliant job because he was very much in the zone and very convincing
Hmm.
as the
Yeah.
evil, twisted, scheming character, and he was very convincing and quite memorable.
Yes, Claudius Marcus was the most memorable character in the whole
Yes.
thing. Initially, I thought, oh, wait, he's making the exposition just through dialogues. He's not actually showing it,
Yeah.
where he lays out what the conflict is for
Hmm.
Kirk. But that shows his cunning
Yes,
nature,
he's very
his
cunning.
scheming brain, which tells us that he has thought through the whole
Correct.
thing. He looks at the whole thing from the captain's point of view, and he knows what exactly problems does Kirk have. Kirk is tongue tied. He can't do anything except be stubborn. So
Yeah.
that's a rare situation that Kirk was put in,
Correct.
right? So that is thought through the whole thing so
Yep.
well. If not for Scott's interference, Kirk would have died for
Yep.
sure. There's no two ways to that.
The-
It was just a stroke of luck that gave them the communicator, and the condition green meant what it
Yep.
meant. Otherwise, Kirk would have died.
Correct.
He didn't even know he was going to be alive or not. Just like the previous
Yeah.
episode, Kirk didn't know whether he was going to live or not till the very last moment.
Yes. Correct.
I think he's a very good antagonist in this episode. Claudius Marcus definitely did a good job in this.
Yep.
I was originally worried, why is he doing all the exposition through dialogue? But it was well
Yeah,
worth it.
character who had a lick of sense in this episode. Uh, Kirk, who,
Yeah.
despite being trapped here, having Spock and McCoy getting thrown into the arenas, he has time for romance with Drusilla. He was very
Yes.
out of place.
Yeah.
And the fights were comical. What were they doing? So just swinging
Yeah.
this way and that. And for a master gladiator, I don't think Flavius was very effective. Of course, he was holding back, but he didn't seem very handy with that gladius or whatever he was given. He seemed a bit flat-footed. Yep.
Well, with McCoy I think his game was reduced 3 levels
At
below
least.
his normal level.
Didn't he say you could at least try to defend yourself? What
What
do
do
you
you think
think you're
I'm doing?
doing? And McCoy, yeah,
McCoy is like
yeah.
this is
McCoy is
awesome.
just. I am defending myself. What do you think I'm doing?
Yeah, those two guys pulled it off the best. McCoy Spock moments were the best in all of
Yep.
this.
Yeah.
Spock was playing second fiddle in this
Correct.
entire episode. He was doing the things he was supposed to, but he definitely came out second or third. He's usually right there in the front for
Yeah.
me. Claudius Marcus certainly aced and went ahead, while after that was Spock and
Yep.
McCoy. In fact, at one moment when you have that Spock McCoy inside the I think the second time Spock is trying to get out, and McCoy goes on saying, "Hey, I'm also worried."
Yeah, that was a
So
nice
you can
moment.
see for a moment, human half looks at some, and I think he looks at the camera with a longing, saying, "Hey, yeah, I am worried too."
Yep.
And McCoy had to, when he says that out loud, he's like snaps off,
Correct. But
and
before that,
Spock says
McCoy also
snaps.
said, I like that.
Hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin,
Yes,
yes.
I wrote
Spock
that
is a
down.
image. I like it. And I
Yeah.
think between that, Claudius, it made the episode just about watchable. And of course, I would like
Yes,
to
I
know
agree.
why Claudius Marcus's insignia is that of Shakespeare. I would really like to know. That
I saw that
yeah,
on Memory
very
Alpha
intriguing.
also. Why? I have no
Yeah,
idea. I think they just planted random things into
it
the
was very
episode.
rallying.
In fact, the visuals that they show of
Yep.
Rome, none of them were actually in Rome,
Yeah.
apparently. The first one I saw was MIT's Prime building,
Yes,
Massachusetts Institute of
correct.
Technology. Second one is in
With
Paris.
French
Third
text.
one is in
Yeah,
Poland. Yes, with
yeah,
French text. And the third one was in
yeah.
Poland. So they were Roman architecture, but none of them in Rome per se. There are so many beautiful buildings in Rome. They could have easily picked a footage from any of
It was
those.
totally
Would have
random, I
served the
feel like. They
purpose.
took buildings that have got a vague resemblance to Roman architecture and they put everything together.
Hmm.
Yeah, they were just spliced together. That was a problem with this episode. Too many things spliced together and they didn't quite come together that well.
Hmm.
It's a pity that it took some banter and tried to
Hmm.
make it even watchable. It's a
Hmm.
yeah, it's very upsetting actually. And Kirk, like you said, he was a passive character. He was
Hmm.
allowing things to happen.
Yeah.
He couldn't. Where did his wits go? His wits disappeared completely, and he was allowing one thing to happen. He was not able to talk his way out of the situation, and ultimately, Merik or Captain Merik had more initiative than he did, which is a very strange twist in the tale.
Yeah. Maybe a twist of Kirk working with Merik on appealing to his loyalty somehow could have revived this episode or given Kirk something to work with. It was just nothing. The one initiative was when the power goes off, he just ducks
Yeah,
the bullets.
correct.
That's a active thing that Kirk did.
Yeah,
And the condition green thing. I think those are only two things he got to
correct.
do,
And that's
really,
about
from
it.
Kirk's perspective. The romance, which apparently in the BBC version of it, they clipped out the
Yeah,
whole
that
thing,
makes more
because they
sense.
said it's unnecessary for the story. Yeah, it didn't move the story forward. It didn't help
It was
with
very.
anything.
I'm amazed that he could even think of that in the middle of all this chaos. It seemed very character, but it did seem bizarre that he was willing for a romance while his crew is in trouble and he is in trouble, and then you have this ruthless empire after him, and yeah, he's just, yeah, let me just spend time with this beautiful woman. A
So
slave, which meant she may not have wanted to be there, and he made use of her anyway. So it's a bit of an
hmm,
exploitation situation, also. That situation made me all
yes.
kinds of uncomfortable.
Given that he's a starship captain, how can he give in to whatever she was trying to do?
Correct.
So that doesn't make any sense to Kirk as a captain, Kirk as a member of the
Yeah.
Federation. No, nothing. All that goes out of the
And
window.
there were some things that didn't have to be said, like calling the Roman gods false gods. That was not required.
Oh yeah,
Also, you have
yes.
this scene where Spock says people who worship the sun are primitive. That wasn't required. You didn't have to do that.
Actually, I was just trying to recall the number of civilizations which have had sun worship as part of their basic culture. We start with the Egyptians, the Aztecs,
Yes,
here in
correct.
India, and it's not superstition. To in fact, it's very natural for an alien civilization to pick their elements around them and to worship them, treat them as
Correct.
deities. The first natural thing to do, according to me.
Absolutely.
And you can it in fact it's very easily believable for them to worship water, worship the sea, worship the whatever else is around, because that's what they see, that's what gives them
Hmm.
life. It's natural for many cultures, as we have seen in our own civilizations. They do think of themselves as sons of x equal to some
Yeah.
element that they find around
And it's
themselves.
also natural
So
to worship something that gives light and heat from the sky. See
yeah,
how that
yeah,
turns
so
somebody barbaric or backwards, as Spock seems to think, which is also a bit uncharacteristic for Spock, because
yeah,
it was too judgmental for him. I don't think he would care that way, but here he is,
correct,
judging somebody's culture and religion just didn't make much sense.
yes,
So there were a lot
correct.
of out of character moments, I feel like, and they could have done a little better with all of it. I feel that this inclusion of the Roman Empire was a little too much. I also think when they're flipping through this magazine, they find cars named after the gods. I don't think any civilization would go that far, especially if the religion that they practice is active. I don't think they're going to name so many cars after all their gods, one after the other. It seemed more like tokenism than anything else.
I read this one in Memory Alpha that for Kirk it shouldn't be surprising
Yeah.
because he's met Apollo before, according to the
Correct.
storyline.
Yeah.
So it's for them, they found it to be a Roman god. So they went and used this. Well, he's met
But
Apollo
Apollo,
and
I
he
guess,
theorized that it could be a real
yeah.
god,
I guess they would
which
Apollo is Greek, and whatever the Romans do is rubbish. But whatever the Greeks do, yeah, maybe it was real. That's it. Kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit because of how stereotyped the Roman Empire was shown to be.
yes.
They have decided that this empire is utterly evil, and they keep showing it that way, and no
Hmm.
scope for anything different or anything out of the ordinary. Empire bad, Roman Empire especially bad. I
Right.
think that's why he didn't connect Apollo with this, because Apollo is more Greek. I'm just trying to make sense of something that can't be made sense of, but still, yeah.
Now, in that episode, Kirk
Correct.
takes a balanced view, saying, "Hey, maybe Greeks gave us so much to our
Yeah.
civilization, a growth of our
Yeah.
civilization. Gave them that benefit of doubt. He didn't treat Apollo as bad because he is
Yeah.
bad, right? So he's
Correct.
not absolute bad, but the bad things he was trying to do to the ship is demanding worship and all
Yeah.
that. He balanced that with the fact that it had that civilization had given so much to the contribution of the modern
Correct.
civilization.
Correct.
And if you think about it, Roman civilization did the same thing for based civilizations. Not just Kirk, but the rest of the characters also seem to say
Yep.
that. I think they could have focused it on Claudius Maximus, who's clearly the bad guy who's trying to ride on this and make good fortune of
Mm-hmm.
that. We could have made it more
Correct.
personal than
Yep.
with the entire civilization
It is
bad
bad.
mouthing it that
Yeah.
way.
Guy being bad in a civilization of millions, that's fine. It would have worked a lot better. But showing him as bad and everybody else is bad because Roman, that doesn't make much sense to me. And I also thought Kirk's observation that this Rome will fall soon was a little too self righteous.
I guess somewhere the pent up frustration with their own. That's what I again. This is all sources memory alphas. Pent up frustrations with the network and the obsession with the
Yeah.
ratings that led them to write this. When they equated their own network to an empire, everything bad about that came
Yeah,
out. Nothing against Roman
yeah.
Empire, but it is more
But the
against the
Roman
network.
Empire usually fares very badly in most of these in most of these shows. So they found this and they said, "Bad empire, let's drag that into this also and bash them also in the process and look very good and try to look very good and self-righteous." Yeah, I wish they had made the arena a little bigger. Why is it so tiny? There's no space.
Well, see, I think the what they were going for was that they have built a spaceship in such a tiny
Yeah,
place. Episode after episode, that's what they
correct.
show,
Yeah.
right? There are what 3 or 4 sets, and made us believe that there's a spaceship hurtling through
Correct. Yep.
space, right? So I think that's what they were giving us a flavor of, saying, "Look how tiny a space you guys actually look at." And you actually build your rest of the world
Yeah,
around it, and that's what
that
they.
actually.
Maybe I'm just giving them a benefit. I'm not taking anything away from what
Yeah,
you're saying. Giving them a benefit of doubt
absolutely.
here.
That did cross my mind. When it comes to the Enterprise, I understand it's shot in a very small space, but it does give that illusion of
Hmm.
space. The arena doesn't do that. It looks
Hmm.
like a cramped space, and there's no space to move. These fighters, you
Yeah.
take one step and you'll fall off the mat.
Yeah.
So,
2 steps and you're killing
yeah,
the
that's
cameraman. Yes.
that's a problem with the arena. Why is it so tiny? At least make it look big.
True.
The background was such
True.
a shoddy piece. The artwork was good, but it looked like artwork. It wasn't convincing at all that way. So very poor setup.
So let's talk about our likes and dislikes. I think we've talked enough about the likes, but if you have any more, this would be a good chance to talk about our likes and
Oh my
dislikes.
goodness. I like the banter between Spock and McCoy because they seem to have this
Hmm.
rivalry friendship, which is
Yes.
very interesting to watch. And their camaraderie is
Yeah.
quite nice despite them constantly bickering with each other. I also liked Claudius's character because he was so forceful and evil and the actor did a brilliant job. So those things I liked quite a bit. And yeah,
Hmm.
the sun
Hmm.
in the sky was nice and
Yeah.
bright and yellow because it's our sun, but still,
Yeah.
it looked pretty.
Yeah.
They could have made the arena a bit better. I feel like they should have spared the Roman Empire from this. A little less self righteousness would have been a good start. And altogether,
Hmm.
I feel that the satire on television ratings and networks did not come through as effectively as they had hoped. What about you, Bala?
Hmm. For me, in fact, I like the idea that this is a satire on TV
Yeah.
and ratings. But like you said, the execution probably this wasn't convincing enough for me to call it a
Mm,
satire. So,
yeah.
yes, sometimes this has been good shows being pulled off just because of rating here or rating there. On the other hand, keeping those shows running because they have a good rating, that's probably weighing on everyone else's mind. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. They have to base it on
Correct.
something because there's lots of money
Yep.
riding.
Yep.
Yes, I agree with that part. But is that something they should be basing everything on and obsessing about it? That's what this episode brings to
Mhm.
light. But have they done it well? I
Mm,
don't think
yeah,
so.
correct.
Marcus, sorry, Claudius
Marcus, yeah.
Marcus. He was fantastic. He's really, really fantastic. For me, he was the bright spot in this entire episode. I like the idea of Romans with the TV.
Yeah.
That it did give me a flavor, or it reminded me of patterns of
Mm,
force, which we talked about during our
yep, yep.
discussion. So I like that, but I think it fell flat because the logic was
Yeah.
missing. If it was Americus who had corrupted the whole thing and made them behave like this, but 5 years, 6 years time is too less for that.
Correct.
So it didn't come through for
Mm.
me. And this whole idea of sun worshippers, that was a giant mess. They could have left
Yes.
it that way and just started with rebels, slaves, and went on with the TV commentary. That probably would have been better.
Mm.
The last aha moment of Uhura explaining Son of God completely fell
Yes.
flat
Too
for me.
self-righteous.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a valid explanation. It's great that she's correcting her captain and the others, all these men. In fact, it would have been nicer saying, "Hey, you keep talking about men are brothers. What about women? Women are
Yeah.
sisters, something like that." She could have just brought about that whole spin. That would have been interesting more than this spin of, it's talking about Son of God and Roman Empire
Correct.
falling.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that didn't go very well for
Mm.
me. Americas, oh man, I don't know where to start. So that's definitely a dislike for
Yep.
me. I
Absolutely.
didn't like it at all. Drusilla, let's just not talk about it. That's it.
Yeah, she was
Hmm.
totally one-dimensional. There's nothing to it.
Yes. Yeah, poor thing was dovetailed in the first scene, and so was she in the last scene when she appeared. Let's leave it there. One last thing to end our episode, which is hypothetically, if the screenwriter were to appear, what would we ask them to change or
I
explain?
think what this episode needs the most is context. It doesn't have any
Hmm.
context. It needs more explanation. It needs more of a story structure, something tighter. Please remove the Roman Empire from this because it makes no sense. And I understand they could probably change a lot of things and focus more on the aspects of satire. It would have been a brilliant episode, particularly given the banter between Spock and McCoy. So I think they need to
Hmm.
remove a lot of elements to make it work, and maybe the screenwriter could do that. What do you think?
I was thinking about why are they doing this episode itself? Why hurt the hand that feeds
Yeah.
you, right? You're talking about the network as if it's outside of you. You're also part of the network. Why create a satire which creates ill will
That's
towards something that made who you
correct.
are? Yes, you can express yourself. You have that freedom, but why do that in the
Exactly.
first
So
place?
much.
I wanted some explanation at that level,
Yes.
not even at the story level, nor at the execution
Correct.
level, but at the start of the premise itself. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Parvati, for the intense
Thank
analysis.
you.
I had fun with this, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.